Martha Minow, legal scholar. Martha Minow's research focus includes equality and inequality, human rights, war crimes and genocide, and pluralism. She's written several books including Making All the Difference, Breaking the Cycles of Hatred, Memory, Law and Repair, and Between Vengeance and Forgiveness, Facing History After Genocide and Mass Violence. Minow explores with us the origins of hateful acts, the path from vengeance to forgiveness, and how to change people's consciousness. Question. In Breaking the Cycles of Hatred, you list forgiveness as an inadequate response to collective violence because no one can be ordered to forgive. Forgiveness must be granted, and to expect forgiveness from victims is to re-victimize them. However, for the societal scars of violence to truly heal, shouldn't forgiveness be an ultimate goal for all responses to violence, even if it is not required of initial collective responses, as you suggest? Martha Minow. I have struggled to try to articulate what the alternatives are to vengeance on one side and forgiveness on the other. It is a good question to ask. What's so bad about forgiveness? Isn't that the goal? When I started researching this question and I tapped into the great resources of Harvard libraries, I found that there was very little written about forgiveness. The only material I found when I started writing about forgiveness in 1996 was in the Divinity School library. There were very strong and powerful writings about forgiveness in various theological traditions, but people in the different religious traditions disagreed over whether forgiveness should be granted before there has been contrition by wrongdoers. Different traditions have very different views about that. Some think it is the granting of forgiveness that could be the triggering act for the change of the wrongdoer. Others feel strongly that forgiveness should not be given until there has been a change by the one who committed a wrong. It struck me as a very basic point that we could recapitulate some of the very conflicts that we are trying to avoid if we emphasize forgiveness, because there are different religious views about forgiveness. Second, whatever forgiveness may mean in these different traditions, there seems to be commonality in the recognition that forgiveness involves the victims relinquishing their sense of resentment, however rightfully it was earned. Martha Minow goes on to add, this kind of response, expecting forgiveness from victims, really made me think about how wrong it is to assume or expect forgiveness, especially from people who have been severely victimized. In a profound sense, the only thing that the victim of serious violence possesses immediately after the violence is control over his or her own response to that experience. If that experience is taken away and the person is told, do not respond the way that you are responding, it is wrong for you to hold on to resentment, it seems to me a further deprivation, a further dishonoring of that victim. Question. Earlier you mentioned that there is a big difference between the practical and ideological aspects of war. As Americans, we often rely on thinking of war as an ideological issue because we are not as familiar with the practical aspects and instead see it romanticized in movies. Do you think that there is a way to bring to people a real consciousness and understanding of war on a very practical level? Would that change their minds about being so willing to invade other countries? Martha Minow. There was a thought experiment somebody had not long ago that I thought was pretty good. If in order to launch a war, a public official had to actually press a button that was implanted inside the body of a human being, and the only way to actually press the button was to cut open the human being, that could bring home the fact that human beings will die when that button is pressed. This is just a thought experiment, but it is a good one. At the moment, there is no immediate experience of killing or death for the president or the Congress who authorize war. In contrast, it is striking that the military in America are the least enthusiastic about war. People who have actually had experience with war are not in favor of starting a new one. To think about institutional, practical, and imaginative ways of bringing home the reality of war to the people who make the decisions seems to me an awfully good idea. When The Children of Heracles, a Euripides play, was recently produced by the American Repertory Theatre in Cambridge, there was a brilliant and courageous decision made not only to produce a play that deals with the issue of refugees, but to produce it in a contemporary setting. A further inspired decision was to involve real refugees in the production. Many students from our local high school who are themselves refugees became involved in the production and appeared each night. The producers tried to make this play function the way that theater did at the time that Euripides wrote, when theater was about contemporaneous politics. Theater was about creating an arena where citizens could actually see and debate the issues of the day. Here in the Cambridge production, the play was introduced each night by a panel discussion including a refugee and an observer of the current political or historical context. This helped make the play seem immediate and urgent and generated extensive audience discussion about living through war and loss. It is hard to think about going to war in the abstract after such discussions. The combination of personal stories, dramatic narratives, and structural analysis could motivate people to think and behave with more attention to human consequences. Question: how can we develop international bodies that deal more with issues related to national sovereignty and possibly work towards developing international law or even an international conception of morality? Martha Minow. The most important contributors to the development of the ideas and even the practice of public international law for the last 50 to 70 years have not been governments. They have been non-governmental actors. They have been grassroots organizations and international non-governmental organizations. These NGOs have been important both in articulating the content of these ideals and also in creating processes of monitoring, exchanging, communicating, pressuring, and shaming behavior. As it turns out, the intellectual force and the muscle in the movement for international human rights is not in government and not in the UN. There's something very exciting about that because it suggests that actually there is power in the weak. In fact, the powers of the weak over time may be more powerful than the powers of the strong. Those people who work for governments and the UN have enormous sets of constraints about what they can do, what they are willing to do, and what they are politically able to do. People who do not have all of those obligations may have more freedom, more ability to maneuver. A promising response to globalization in its corporate form is growth in civil society, which takes a comparable international transborder form. Question: should people who hope to make a positive difference in the world follow in your footsteps and get law degrees? Martha Minow. My advice is not to go to law school. Law school makes sense, as was true in my case, if you think that the materials you want to spend time using your mind to grapple with are legal materials. If you have a passion for law, or if you think that you really want to litigate, or that this will give you the kind of credibility you will need in settings that you want to go to, by all means go to law school. But if you are looking for ways to make a difference in the world around these issues, the more immediate and greater need is to affect the consciousness of people. Law is a limited means for doing that. It would be far more effective to write screenplays or to work on elementary school curricula. Ask yourself, what have been the most influential experiences in shaping your ideas about the world, about violence, about human dignity? What are the images that you have? What are the ideas that you have? Events unfolding in history may be the most indelible in people's minds, but also influential images are from mass media, and here I am thinking of film and television as much as the news. I have several students who have earned law school credit for writing screenplays, and even one who sold one. Write plays, write fiction, write journalism, produce rock videos, figure out ways to affect people's consciousness.